You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. It is a Locked On crossover edition as the college football playoff has finally arrived. He is Tyler Wojciak of Locked On Irish. I'm Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. And first time we've been able to join together because one of the biggest games in Indiana State football history, it's the Hoosiers and the Irish for the first ever game in the college football playoff of the expanded 12-team playoff. Tyler, great to have you on, man. What a legendary moment this has been. And it feels like it's taken forever to get here, but here it is. The playoffs have arrived.
I know. I can't wait. This has been something that, at least on my show, we've talked about literally throughout the offseason. Like, the only way that this season was going to be a success was if they made it to this spot. And right now we're here. Not going to lie, did not expect to be facing off Indiana, but I think that is what makes this such an intriguing matchup. You have one of the more like older traditional programs in all of college football playing against a new team who, you know, they've been around for a long time. They have not had this much success, and it has been an unbelievable season for the Hoosiers. So it's going to be a heavyweight fight on Friday night.
Well, near the end of the show, we'll kind of give our final predictions. We win if this, you win if that. You're going to kind of pick my brain a little bit and get some more information on Indiana. But I want to start by picking your brain a little bit and talking about the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame, a team that tripped up early, a big trip up early, and then kind of fell back and did their own thing under the radar after losing that game against Northern Illinois. Most people counted them out, said, no way that you could bounce back from that. But I think Notre Dame's done a great job of doing just that, and here they are yet again in the college football playoffs.
Yeah, in a way, that loss to Northern Illinois seems to be one of the best things that could have happened to this team. It is not something that I expected, but that's been the message from the team, and specifically Marcus Freeman, really. Like, he has not forgotten about that loss to Northern Illinois, brings it up all the time in press conferences to the team, and he makes sure that everyone who is on that team never forgets that moment, that feeling after losing a game like that. And I think that it has motivated them the rest of the year because, like Indiana, Notre Dame has been just pounding their opponents for most of that stretch. They won 9 of their last 10 games by double digits. So they weren't going to let that happen again. And now they go up against a team like Indiana, who they absolutely cannot afford to overlook them. You can't afford to overlook anyone in the college football playoff. But Indiana is a very talented team, and I think they have all of Notre Dame's attention.
I'm really, really impressed by what Riley Leonard has done this year. His stats aren't going to blow you away. He wasn't, there wasn't Heisman consideration there, but all he does is win games, and he's done exactly that at Notre Dame. What do you think he does best? What should Indiana fans and Kurt Cignetti and Indiana be concerned about with that Notre Dame offense led by Riley Leonard?
He is such a great athlete. And it's kind of funny when you watch him run. It doesn't look like he's running that hard. He doesn't have the greatest technique. He's a big guy. He's 6'4", borderline 6'5", and he kind of runs like a deer and probably should do a better job of protecting himself. There's times when he runs and jumps almost like a basketball player trying to go for an and one layup. But guys can't catch him. And once he gets that second step, like, he is gone. There was this play against Florida State very early on in the game where he rattled off this 35-yard touchdown run, made like 4 guys miss. He did something like that against Purdue, but Purdue was so bad. I think you and I could probably do that against their defense this past year. But he does sometimes struggle with accuracy throwing the ball, but especially in a game like this where the weather conditions are going to be, not ideal for a passing game, I think you're going to see a lot of Riley Leonard running the football early and often.
And then you look on the defensive side of the football where Notre Dame, where would you rank this defense in terms of what they've had the last decade plus? Just watching from the outside in, I put it pretty high up there. Listen to some of these final scores for Notre Dame's opponents. 7-3, 7, 13, 14, 3, 14. You're talking about a team that just doesn't give up a whole lot of points. Indiana could say that too, which could end up being maybe just a ugly slugfest on Friday night.
Comparatively, it's tough because if this defense were at full strength, I would put them up against anyone. But they lost arguably their best player on that defense, cornerback Benjamin Morrison. He suffered a hip injury and had to undergo surgery. So he has been out since, I believe it was the Stanford game, which is back in like mid-October. And then he was replaced by Leonard Moore, who's a true freshman who the coaching staff was really high on going into the season. And I figured that the drop-off would be significant. Up to this point, It hasn't been. Leonard Moore has been fantastic, but still, Benjamin Morrison is a future first-round pick. So I think that hurts them a little bit, especially when you compare it to some of the other great defenses that Notre Dame has had. They got to the playoff in 2020 due in large part to that defense. Same with 2018. They also lost their two best edge rushers, Jordan Botelho and Boubacar Traore. So they've been able to do a great job despite missing those guys, but I just can't put them as like the best defense that Notre Dame has had in the past decade because they're not playing at full strength.
That's totally fair, and I totally get it. But yet they're still performing, right? They're still performing at a very high level. Notre Dame with 4 top 25 wins on the season. Would you say that you guys are battle-tested? You're ready? You're prepared for whatever the stretch of this playoff is? Because, look, for either one of us, Indiana or Notre Dame, I don't think our stretch and our path to a championship is all that difficult. I don't think Georgia's the world beater they used to be. You've got, SMU or Penn State or Boise State below us. I mean, I don't think the path is all that bad. Do you think Notre Dame's prepared for it?
I do. And honestly, I'm not sure if I would have said that if the USC game had not gone the way that it had. Notre Dame ended up winning that game by 14 points, but they had two basically 100-yard pick sixes there to seal the game. But there was a point late in the fourth quarter, Notre Dame was only up a touchdown. USC was driving the ball. They were going in to tie it, potentially even go for 2 to take the lead. But then Christian Gray, who had a really tough game up until that point, made an unbelievable play, intercepted the ball at the goal line, returned it 99 yards to the house. So then Notre Dame goes up 2 touchdowns with under 4 minutes to go, and that was basically the game. But it was the first time, and I can't even remember how long, where they felt real game pressure, where the opponent actually had a chance to beat them late in the game. So for the defense to come out and respond like that in such a critical moment does give me hope that they're ready to go. Offensively, they haven't had a situation like that in a really long time. They didn't capitalized against Northern Illinois, but against Texas A&M, arguably the biggest game of the regular season, they had the ball late, score was tied. I was there. The environment was rocking, and they went 85 yards down the field to score a touchdown and really put the game away. So the offense has been tested, the defense has been tested, but I think it's going to be an entirely different test on Friday.
Indiana, Notre Dame, the first game Friday night, the standalone game Friday night in the college football playoff. That's some good information on Notre Dame. Let's get some information on Indiana for those Notre Dame folks. We're talking the Hoosiers right after this on a Locked On crossover edition.
Today's episode is presented by TNT College Football. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it is guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports' coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. All right, Jacob. I really just want to know what the season has been like from your perspective as we start here, because no one really saw this coming. I think even the most diehard optimistic Hoosier fans did not expect an 11-1 regular season and a berth in the college football playoff. So what were your expectations going into the season? And at what point did you realize that this team was a legit contender to make the college football playoff?
I think reasonable expectations were people were excited, right? It was something new, something different. We were just looking for some changes, right? With Curt Cignetti coming in, the guy that made all the headlines with the quotes, "I win, just Google me," right? That's what really started off everything. And so we were just looking for something different, some changes in the foundation of Indiana football. I'm talking with the president, with the AD, with the facilities, with NIL. I mean, there were a lot of changes that had to happen. And Curt Cignetti came in and made that a point to say, we have to change if we want to compete long term. Now, it helps when you start winning football games like he did immediately. So for expectations, I mean, win a couple of games, beat somebody you're not supposed to, like that was just kind of it. And then all of a sudden, it just picked up and you really started to see that something was different. And as crazy as it sounds, the road win at UCLA just the first month into the season was where we said, maybe Indiana's not too bad. Not that UCLA is any great, but Indiana doesn't go on the road and beat somebody in the Rose Bowl. That just hasn't happened in this team's football history. And then it just built from there. And you started hammering teams and teams after team. You went up against Michigan and it was tough, but you won. The Ohio State game wasn't great, but then you turn around and you smack Purdue. So I think the UCLA game was the one that really started it all. And it's been the best season in the history of Indiana football.
For me, the UCLA game definitely got my attention, and I live out here, so I have a bunch of Indiana friends who went to that game, and watching them just absolutely hammer the Bruins was certainly a surprise. But for me, the game against Nebraska, when Indiana just dominated them, they won 56-7. I was like, okay, this team is for real. And then they had all that hype and all that buildup going into the Ohio State game, and even though the Buckeyes were up by a lot on the scoreboard for most of the game, it wasn't like they came out and blew Indiana off the field. The game really got out of hand because of 2 bad plays on special teams. So what do you think are the biggest lessons for IU after that game against Ohio State?
I think it's just keep going. I mean, just continue to play and learn from your mistakes, because that was the first game. The Michigan game wasn't clean, but Michigan had one of the better defenses in all of college football. And Indiana was still able to overcome a slow offensive start, injuries and things like that. And you still were able to win the ball game. So I think what they learned from Ohio State was you can compete with these guys. You're right. They didn't blow Indiana out. It wasn't this massive talent gap that we've seen in years past. I mean, Indiana at least belonged, and it was a humbling experience. Yes, but I think you learned you're not perfect. You are beatable. And that was the reality check that we needed. And you turn around and beat Purdue because, well, Purdue's bad. And now you come in against Notre Dame and you feel confident. You've seen that top tier team and you know what somebody like that is going to offer. And yes, I do put Notre Dame in that category for what they've done this season. And so they learned they're not perfect. You've got to play hard and you've got to prepare and you got to execute. Indiana didn't execute offensively, on special teams, defensively broke down a few times. And so, yeah, I think they learned a lot. They feel ready. They feel confident, and they feel that they do belong in the college football playoff.
Offensively, quarterback Curtis Rourke has been the catalyst all season long. He has been really just spectacular for most of the season, except for the Ohio State game and that second half against Michigan, which was actually 6 consecutive quarters, starting with the second half against Michigan. But it's not all his fault. He definitely missed some throws specifically in that Michigan game. But like, how much of the struggles offensively in that second half and in that game against Ohio State do you put on Rourke, or was it more just a result of the supporting cast not really being able to live up to the expectations in those moments?
The Ohio State game was one where Indiana just looked shell-shocked. I mean, you come out, you get a 3 and out, you go down the field, you score. We're up 7-0 on the road in the shoe. We're thinking, no way that this is happening right in front of us, right? And then Ohio State all of a sudden adjusted. And it was really for the first time, Tyler, we saw Indiana just not have a response, because they had been down a few times this season, but they came back and they made games look not close. And so Ohio State threw some things at them they just weren't ready for. They rushed 4 for that first drive or 2. And then they started bringing guys off the edge. They started bringing corner blitzes, and Indiana just had no idea. So it was more of things they just hadn't seen this year. And Michigan, again, is so good defensively. They just got after Curtis Rourke on an offensive line that's been solid, but has had a couple of injuries, and they've had to shift around. And when you can't run the ball, Indiana struggles, and you have 2 guys in Justice Ellison and Tyson Lawton that Indiana relies on heavily, and we couldn't run the ball against Michigan. I thought we ran it pretty well against Ohio State and should have done it more, just didn't get to that, especially when you get down by several scores. So, no, I don't put it on Curtis Rourke. I mean, he's only turned it over 4 times this year. That's not too bad for a guy that I think if he had stayed completely healthy, he would have been sitting in New York for a Heisman ceremony. So I think it's fine. I think, again, Indiana has learned. They know what they are. They know what they have, and they feel confident and ready to go against Notre Dame.
Indiana's offense is based on timing and precision. They run a ton of RPO, and Curtis Rourke has been deadly accurate all season long. But the weather conditions on Friday might not be that great for passing the ball. You're looking at like low 20s temperature-wise. Snow probably early on in the day, but in South Bend, you never really know because they could get lake effect snow, and then you blink and there's all of a sudden 6 inches on the ground. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think the real factor is the wind it could be up to 15 to 20 mile an hour winds in that game, which obviously makes it harder to be accurate. So what kind of an impact do you think the weather will have on this game? Because Indiana just pummeled Purdue in the snow.
Well, and that's the thing. I actually talked about it earlier this week. It's like a lot of the national pundits are saying Indiana better watch out. They better prepare. It's going to be cold on Friday night in South Bend. And it's like, do you not realize we're still playing in our home state? I mean, we're not going across the country. I've used this comparison. This isn't Miami coming up to play in South Bend, or this isn't Texas coming to play, or UCLA or whoever. It's like we're taking a bus and we're staying in the same state. So we're used to it, but also said cold is cold, especially with wind chill. And if it is 15 to 20 mile an hour winds, neither team is going to be able to throw the ball very well or kick the ball very well. And I do want to see Indiana respond on special teams, but I still believe this team is a run-first team, a run-first offense with two backs that you trust at any time, at any place on the field. I think Indiana will be okay, but I think both teams may have to change their strategy a little bit if it is the weather that they're calling for.
Yeah, the snow, the cold, that's one thing. Wind is a totally different deal. So we're just going to have to see what it is on Friday night. But personally, I think the matchups on the line of scrimmage are going to determine the outcome of this game. Are you more confident in Indiana's offensive line or defensive line going up against Notre Dame's?
It's a good question because I'm more confident in Indiana's defensive line than I am their offensive line. But I think Notre Dame's offensive line is probably better than their defensive line. And so I think both units are going up. The two best units are going up against each other, our D-line and your O-line. But, man, that's such a tough question. So I'm still going to take Indiana's D-line. They've just got to get home. They don't have to sack Riley Leonard. Just put a little pressure on him and make him make decisions and make plays. I'll take Indiana's defensive line, but if we don't protect Curtis Rourke, it'll be a long night at Notre Dame.
Where do you think Indiana could be the most vulnerable? Could be either side of the ball.
As crazy as this sounds, I will say the secondary, which has been really good. D'Angelo Podge just earned second-team All-American in the nation. He is a stud, but Notre Dame's not afraid to throw the ball around, and Indiana is susceptible to a big play here and there, and I think Notre Dame is capable of hitting those, and if they do, they could probably score. Now, Indiana's been one of the best teams defensively in the red zone this year because teams don't get down there a whole lot. I'll say the secondary, though. If Notre Dame can throw it, if the wind isn't crazy and they hit a couple of big plays, Indiana could be in trouble.
It really does feel like strength on strength and weakness on weakness, because I would say my biggest concern about Notre Dame in this matchup is the fact that they have not really been explosive in the passing game. And I don't think it's going to get a whole lot better on Friday, given the conditions that we already talked about. I think Notre Dame's wide receiving core, they tried to patch it together in the transfer portal. They've been better than they were last season, but still leave a lot to be desired. So it's going to be a great matchup. I'm glad we were able to cover both sides of the ball. So stick around for full predictions coming up next. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Okay, so yesterday I gave out the Chiefs. They were getting some points in this game because I think there were some rumors that Patrick Mahomes was not going to play. Well, now they are favored by 3.5 on FanDuel. So we're going to stay away from that. We're going to take the Steelers plus 6.5 going up against the Ravens. I think they bounce back this week. And for more, just visit FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Personally, I love PrizePicks because I'm able to play it out here in California, so it's definitely my favorite. And you can download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.
Final segment on a Locked On crossover edition, Locked On Irish, Locked On Hoosiers. And before we make full-on predictions here, Tyler, I just want to reiterate how awesome this moment is. And you can correct me if I'm wrong or if you've heard different, but I feel like a lot of the fans here in the state of Indiana, they're excited about the matchup of Indiana-Notre Dame, but they're also a little disappointed because one of the teams from our state is going to be eliminated in the very first round rather than both of them having the opportunity to make a run. Have you felt that on your side?
No, I have not. I have not encountered as much overlap between the fan bases. I guess maybe it's my own social media timeline has just become so toxic in the past few days. But it has been pretty funny to see the discourse between Notre Dame fans and Indiana fans. And I'm not going to say that one fan base has been more hostile towards the other, because I think the loud minority makes everyone look bad regardless of the fan base. Yeah. But I have appreciated how, obviously Curt Cignetti is a very confident guy and he's very confident in his team. And I think his team is a reflection of that. But I also think the fan base is a reflection of that as well. I don't get the impression at all that Indiana fans are just happy to be here. They think they can win and they think they should win. Do I have that correct?
Absolutely. And whether that, some would say it's a false confidence because, again, it's, Indiana's strength of schedule and they played one tough team and they lost. Whatever. We've dominated so many people, and this team is still good enough to make a run. Win it all? I don't know. There's some really good teams here, but the Hoosiers expect to win this thing. I mean, this is the most historic season in the history of Indiana football. They don't want it to come to an end, and they believe that they can get past Notre Dame, even if it is on the road. And, man, have you seen the ticket prices for this game? It's absurd. It's the most expensive ticket of the first round.
It's actually insane. I will be at the game. Fortunately, I had a friend get me a ticket for face value, so I don't have to basically put a month's rent on this ticket. So grateful for that. But I am interested to hear, what do you think the turnout is going to be? Because I know from the Notre Dame side, they have taken several steps to try to ensure that it is a very pro Notre Dame crowd. The tickets never went to market. Indiana was only given $3,500 to start, and that includes marching band and relatives of the players, the families, all that stuff. But I also know that Indiana and the Hoosier faithful are going to make the trip to South Bend, but getting into the game is a whole different story. So I think it's going to be about 80-20 Notre Dame to Indiana, which would still give you about 16,000 Indiana fans in the game, and they're going to be wearing red and everyone's going to see them. So I think it's going to be a great environment, and I expect to see a whole lot of red this weekend. But inside the stadium, it's like you said, man, it is tough to get in.
Yeah, it is. And that's that's the feeling I've gotten from my community at Locked On Hoosiers is it's a tough ticket, man. It's hot. And look, it's Christmas time. It's tough to come off that type of money. Totally understand. But Indiana fans are seeing this, maybe not as a once in a lifetime because we expect to be good in the future, but this is the biggest game Indiana football has ever played in. I mean, let's just say it like it is. And so they're going to do anything they can. I think 80-20 is probably about right. Maybe 75-25, but I expect the Notre Dame faithful to show up and be ready to go. It will be a legit road game for Indiana, one that they haven't had to play in all that often. And so it comes down to it. Notre Dame, Indiana, first game of this expanded college football playoff. The entire country will be watching on Friday night on ESPN. I'm jealous that you're going to get to be there. What does Notre Dame have to do to beat Indiana, and do you think they do it?
They have to be able to run the ball. And it's so cliche to say, right? Every game is won on the line of scrimmage and you got to be able to establish the run. That's true 90% of the time across all levels of football, high school, college, NFL, whatever the case may be. But Notre Dame is going to try and run. And even though Indiana has statistically one of the best rushing defenses in all of college football. They have some real serious players in their front seven. Notre Dame is going to come out early and try to challenge them. And if they are able to lean on them, if they are able to run the ball with Jeremiah Love, who I believe is, I know this is going to surprise some people because one running back was just in New York for the Heisman Trophy. I think Jeremiah Love is the most talented running back in all of college football, but he hasn't had nearly the same workload as Ashton Genty or even a Cam Scadaboo at Arizona State, but he is electric. Now, he shares the rock with Jadarian Price, another very talented running back. And as I talked about earlier, Riley Leonard is going to run a lot in this game as well. So they're going to get creative in their run game. If they are able to run the ball, I think they're going to be able to control the game that way, shorten it up a little bit. So that would be my biggest key. But because if Indiana stops the run and they force Riley Leonard into passing situations, he really has not been forced to pass that much this year, and I don't have as much confidence in his throwing ability, especially in weather like this. So if Indiana is able to stop the run, I'm not sure if Notre Dame is going to be able to pull it out. But I like the Irish to win 28-17. I think it's going to be a close game throughout, and they get a late touchdown to pull away, get the win, and cover that 7.5-point spread. But don't get me wrong here. This is going to be an absolute battle for the entire game.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up the Riley Leonard running situation, because I think that's one of the keys for Indiana is we have to be able to stop him, whether it's a design quarterback run or whether he's just making a play with his legs to extend a play. We've got to be able to keep him contained. And Indiana hasn't gone up against very many running quarterbacks this year, but when they did contain him. I look at Dylan Raiola at Nebraska. That was the situation where everybody was concerned. He's going to run all over Indiana. Can they contain him? Can they stop him? And they did. And so if Indiana can do that and not turn the ball over, talk about cliche and basics. I mean, that goes back to Pee Wee football, Tyler. Don't turn the ball over, something Indiana did a couple of times against Ohio State. Interceptions, fumbles, bad special teams. Those basic things are what make the difference in a big-time playoff game. So stop Riley Leonard running the ball and don't turn it over. If Curtis Rourke can continue to play at the high level that he did almost all season long, except when he had the thumb injury, and Indiana can get their ground game going too, I think we have a chance. And I think we pull off the upset. We're about a touchdown underdog. I think we keep it close. I think we get a stop defensively and a late field goal, one we haven't had to do very often. We don't kick very many field goals because we've scored so many touchdowns this year. But I think Indiana gets it done. I'm going to say 24-21. Indiana walks out of South Bend and they go to play Georgia in the second round of the playoffs. I hope it's a good game either way, and I think it will be, man. What a special moment this will be Friday night.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game. It sounds like we're both on the under. I would suggest anyone betting on this game, that would probably be the safest bet. I just don't really see either one of these defenses giving up a lot of points. I think it's going to be stingy. I think you're going to see a lot of run-heavy stuff early on, try to set the tone. But it's going to be a great night, man. Great game. I can't wait for it.
Tyler Wojciak of Locked On Irish, Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. Be sure, if you're watching us on YouTube, to like these videos, give your score predictions down below, subscribe to each one of the shows. And for all of our audio listeners, we appreciate you being there as well. Follow, subscribe, turn on notifications, do whatever you got to do to never miss an episode of Locked On Irish and Locked On Hoosiers. Tyler, thanks so much for your time, my man.
Anytime, man. Thanks for listening to this crossover edition of Locked On Irish. There's been a slight change to the schedule. This is going to be the last episode before the big game tomorrow night. Luke Smith and I will be back on Saturday morning with a post-game reaction show, but unfortunately some things came up with our guest, Tim Murray. We weren't able to get it done this week, but hopefully we'll get something on the books with him next week. Thanks again for tuning in. Remember to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. Enjoy the game on Friday, folks. It's going to be a great one. Can't wait to watch it and can't wait to talk about it with you on Saturday. I'll see you then.